Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is December 15th, 2017. Greetings from Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I Skyped all the way across town this week to the world headquarters of Forrester Research in order to catch up with James McQuivey. On this, his 19th visit to the podcast in the past 7 years, James weighs in on mistakes Amazon might be making with Alexa, the real prize that Whole Foods represents, a likely choice for HQ2, and how smart companies might be able to convince Amazon to not choose their industry to disrupt.
I think Amazon feels pretty confident that they could attack any business they want, and the incumbents will spend 4 or 5 years resisting before they realize that they have no choice. Whereas a little proactive customer obsession on the part of any of those companies could probably make it so that Amazon decides to go elsewhere.
Also this week, Amazon is disrupting the book business in India, helping Santa whisk Christmas presents to more cities and towns in the U.S.'s lower 48 states, and even reaching out with holiday cheer to Apple and Google. Let's set the stage by asking Alexa a question. Alexa, what's the meaning of Christmas?
Christmas, a shortened version of Christ's Mass, is an annual celebration commemorating Jesus Christ's birth. Western churches celebrate it on December 25th, a date thought to be tied to the winter solstice. The first recorded Christmas celebration was in Rome in 336 AD. The Puritans banned Christmas in the 17th century. It quickly became legal again, but was still associated with misbehavior. Charles Dickens and other writers reinvented the holiday, associating it with family and gift-giving.
First up in news, let's travel to India, where a story on December 10th by Rahul Sachitanand, editor of the Economic Times, highlights the impact Amazon is having on the book publishing business there. Sachitanand interviewed Sanjeev Jha, Jha, who joined Amazon 2 years ago as director of Kindle Content for India. The Amazon exec began by surprising me with some overall Kindle publishing statistics that I hadn't been aware of lately. He said that so far this year, KDP has doubled the number of its authors every month when compared with year-earlier levels, and the same growth in authors occurred in 2016. I think that's worldwide, not just the U.S. KDP titles now number 3.5 million. In India, 20 of the top 100 best-selling books are by KDP authors. KDP authors account for an even larger number, 33 of the top 100 bestsellers in the U.S. These numbers, frankly, astonish me. I've known previous author earnings reports that have shown Amazon's self-publishing business is booming, but a third of the best-selling books on Amazon, that's pretty impressive. It makes sense that the company would now see India as a huge opportunity in publishing. Jha said India is going to have 1 billion literate people and a half billion cell phones. Or he didn't say in what time frame, sometime in the near future, I would expect. We want to scale up in India, he said. Part of the challenge is to publish in the numerous languages reflected in the Indian market. Amazon now sells books in Hindi, Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, and Malayalam. And KDP has these languages available in beta test. In October 2016, Amazon acquired a publishing company in India named Westland Limited. Jha said the acquisition enables Amazon to learn about the book business in India as well as acquiring the work of major authors. 12 of the top 20 authors in India are from Westland in trade fiction. Given the size of the Indian marketplace for reading and the rapid expansion of smartphone use, Jha envisions whole new forms of online literature or serialized novels. You know, I remember it had to be well over 10 years ago reading for the first time that Japanese cell phone users were reading books on their phones. And I just saw at the time, that's crazy. How could you read a book on such a little screen? Well, surprise, surprise. Now the reading of books on cell phones is rivaling people reading on devices like the Kindle. I think it's very possible that Amazon's innovations in book publishing in the India market will result in things they learn, and we'll be seeing some more surprises in reading technology as the company addresses such a huge market. Alexa, how many days until Christmas?
There are 10 days until Christmas Day.
That's the Echo Show I've got here in the closet while I'm recording. And when she brings up that answer about the number of shopping days till Christmas, there's a nice scene of a creche with the angels and the shepherds around the baby Jesus in a scene, a traditional religious scene. So with Christmas coming and the goose getting fat, Amazon yesterday, December 14th, announced expanded same-day and one-day shipping, now available to Prime members in more than 8,000 cities and towns. I'll have a link in the show notes where you can enter your zip code to see if the fast shipping is available where you live. I tried 80202, where Darlene and I used to live in Casper, Wyoming, and the page returned the message, sorry, 80202 is not within a Prime-free same-day delivery or Prime-free one-day shipping area. Same for 04063, where we spend the summer in Ocean Park. Surprisingly, Boulder, Colorado does not have the fast shipping, but Denver does, and so do Boston and Cambridge. If you haven't signed up for Prime membership and you have some guests you'd like to buy at Amazon, and if you live in one of the right places, you could ship them quickly for free. You can sign up for a free 30-day Prime membership. Then, of course, you can cancel it after the holidays before paying anything for Prime if it doesn't make sense to continue it. Prime costs $99 a year. That works out to $8.25 a month. You can also pay $11 a month instead of the annual fee, but that costs you more. You end up paying $132 a year compared with the $99 for the annual fee, but you can also cancel anytime you want. For the first tech tip, I want to tip you off to a new way that Alexa can wake you up with your favorite music. At night, you can say, Alexa, set an alarm to wake me up tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. with James Taylor music, or fill in your favorite music. If you have more than one Echo, the one you give the command to is the one that will wake you up with the music. You can turn on and off or revise the alarms with your Alexa smartphone app by going to that hamburger menu in the upper left, then tapping on Reminders and Alarms. When you then tap on the Alarms tab, you will see any alarms that you have set. It doesn't appear that you can actually create an alarm from the app. For that, you have to be speaking to an Alexa via a specific device like the Echo that we have in our bedroom here in Cambridge. This week, I spent several hours setting up smart switches at my parents' home and at our house in order to turn on Christmas lights by voice using Alexa. The procedure turned out to be way more complicated than I expected, with several different brands of plugs that I've bought over the recent weeks. I never did get the TP-Link switch to work at my parents' house, but I also brought with me on that project a Wemo plug that worked quite easily. Here at our house, I finally got an eTech City plug to work after 2 separate tech support sessions with their support team. The process for setting up these smart home devices is pretty complicated, I found. I may be making it harder than it needs to be, but it's a 2-step process where you have to download an app for the specific device to your smartphone and connect that app to your internet network. That's where I ran into some trouble at my parents' house. And then you have Alexa find the device via the associated skill. I actually enjoy this kind of a challenge, so there wasn't much wear and tear for me to spend hours on figuring it out. It's kind of a puzzle, and the payoff when it works is pretty delightful. When the eTech City plug finally worked after a long session with a Alexa tech rep from India who didn't appear to celebrate Christmas, but he was happy to help me arrange for the lights to work. It was just kind of a moment of shared enthusiasm when I gave the command and I told my friend in India, they're on, the lights are on. It's we've got lights in the front of the house and the back of the house, and I made a little group out of them. So now all I have to do is say, Alexa, turn on the Christmas lights, and the lights in the back and front porches go on like magic at the same time. And Alexa modestly says, okay. I always learn something when James McQuivey joins us on the show as Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. He has been studying changes in the way people consume media since well before the launch of the Kindle. My first interview with James aired in February of 2010. That was on a now defunct companion podcast named The Reading Edge. We spoke the weekend after Amazon pulled the buy buttons on Macmillan's books in a showdown over agency ebook pricing. Good times. This week's conversation with James took place on Tuesday, December 12th. I began by asking him what has most surprised him so far about Amazon's Alexa strategy.
I've been surprised that Amazon has focused so much on rolling out as many devices as they've rolled out this year. On the one hand, that suggests, hey, this is a real promising, mature market that they're banking on. But on the other hand, it also clutters up the message that you're trying to send to the market. When we have now, I think a total of 7 devices in the Echo family, 4 new this year. And of the new devices we have, 2 of them have cameras, 2 of them have some kind of touch screen. All of that is that's all the right direction. But I'm not sure that you load the market with all of those things at the same time and make people wonder, what is this really about? What does the future look like? That was a skill that Steve Jobs had, was that he used to say, this is the one thing I'm going to make, and I'm not going to create too many options, too many variations until people fully understand the value of something like an iPod or even the iPhone or the iPad. And I think that Amazon might regret that later on, but they have such a good head of steam on the Echo line, and such great use characteristics in terms of the percent of their customers that are actively using the devices that maybe they're willing to take some extra risks right now.
Yeah. Any other slips you've seen this year, mistakes just in how the interface has been operating or problems that have developed?
Yeah, I have to say the Echo look doesn't really offer a lot in the way of benefits. I can't remember if we talked about this before, but the idea of the look was to come up with a Trojan horse way to get a camera into someone's personal living space. Not the kitchen, but maybe the bedroom, the closet, the bathroom, that kind of thing. And I think that's actually the right strategy. I mean, I've been writing about the magic mirror concept since 2012. This is really a strong use case for the future of smart cameras and smart devices in people's more personal living spaces. But the problem is the way it's configured right now is to focus a little too narrowly on this which outfit should I wear kind of approach. Now there's some cool stuff behind that Amazon's uniquely able to fulfill in terms of actually looking at the clothing that you're wearing and comparing it to a database of clothes that are hot sellers right now. I mean, that is a really interesting thing that they can do, but it's a really narrow use case. And so I don't know that those cameras, those look cameras have taken off. I'd also say that the show is underperforming against expectations. If you're going to offer someone what looks like a touchscreen tablet, then I think you need to also offer people some rudimentary tablet functionality, which, not a hard ask, given that Amazon already makes tablets, some very good ones, actually, and should have thought to include some of that basic Android functionality in the device, which would also, by the way, allow them to get around the problem they're having now with Google saying we're not going to let you put YouTube on the Echo Show, which was one of the top use cases that we had in our family for the show, was that we could say, oh, Alexa, play this video on YouTube, and of course it would play. And so we always have videos we want to share as a family, and that's a great use case. But now, of course, you can't do that because of this ongoing tussle with Google. Well, if it was an Android device, you easily could have done that. Now, it would have cost more, I understand that, but giving someone a touchscreen device today that doesn't have tablet functionality just feels like a misstep. Which maybe they could correct for if the device were then somehow magically better. But it's not, actually. We have never, in the however long we've owned our shows, we have 2 of them, so that we can do video calling, from room to room. And of all the years that we've had, or the months that we've had this device, we have never once clicked on a story about, or asked Alexa to tell us a story about sports. Yet, whenever there's a major sporting event, the current trending topics that come up and show up on the screen to try and tantalize you to interact, full of sports. Whether it's some kind of Premier Football League, we got a lot of those over the last several months. What's happening in NFL, NBA, all of that. We just don't care. And that's fine. If you care, good for you. But this is supposed to be the digital era. These devices are supposed to know who we are and what we want and figure out that in 6-8 months of interaction, we've never clicked on that. So stop showing it to us.
Yeah.
So I feel like they released that one a little before it was baked, and they really need to make some improvements in it in 2018, which of course you can do because it's all software, so great. That's one of the great things about upgrades in a digital era. I don't need the device to change. I just need you to change the software. And I think they're going to do that. So, but you start to add these up, and it shows a year in which Amazon hasn't been clear with itself about what its goal with the Echo platform should be. And I think that they'll regret that later. It doesn't mean that they're going to flop. All of these devices, with maybe the exception of the look, are probably going to turn out to be useful down the road. But I think they'll regret that they overstepped on the device side and under-invested on some of the algorithms that drive the experience.
I noticed that the look is still available only by invitation. It seems like that's gone on longer than I would have expected. Do you think that might indicate that they're still not sure they're really going to open that up for anyone to purchase?
I think it's a good indication that they're either at a decision point of, if this is the use case, this fashion comparison use case, we probably need to bail because it's not working if that's what it is. Or let's move to phase two. What else could a camera in your bedroom, bathroom, do? And I personally, and I've written about this for now not a decade, but close to a decade, I personally think that camera in your bathroom, in the home of someone who has medications to take, who is in a health risk of some kind, and so it's an aging in place parent or just someone who is recovering from some kind of incident. The camera in their bathroom would be tremendously, tremendously useful. I just don't know that Amazon's ready quite yet to tell people we want to be in your bathroom with you. But honestly, that's an obvious use case and a really smart move that they will eventually make. And luckily for them, neither Google nor Apple are anywhere close to competing in that space. So they've got some time to figure that out.
There's another one of the devices that I think is going to start shipping soon. It's that little round one. I've lost track of the names. It's like an alarm clock, Echo, something. So now there's sort of two devices, the Look and this little bedside clock in the bedroom, which seems like that's sort of a creepy place to be thinking you're going to be putting cameras for potentially having Amazon. I mean, I don't have a lot of concern about Amazon listening. I think we've talked about this. You can't talk people out of their fears, but maybe it's just the chance to get people talking to Alexa the moment they wake up, that there's a little clock that acts like an alarm or plays James Taylor music when you wake up, and then you can ask what the weather's going to be. It's this sort of proximity that's driving the plethora of devices. But I can see how it kind of muddies the water as to what's the purpose of this thing.
Well, two thoughts in response to that. Number one, the fact that you can't remember what it's called underscores my point. They've released too many of these devices.
I'll jump in here with the name of the device that neither James or I could recall when we talked on Tuesday. It's the Echo Spot. That's a compact Echo with a screen. It sells for $130 compared with $230 for the full-size screened Echo Show. I ordered a Spot in September when it was introduced, and mine is due to arrive here in Cambridge in 4 days on December 19th.
But I also think that they know, and we all know, consumer data will show this, the first thing that people look at when they wake up is their phone. It's next to the bed. They look at it. They check for messages. They use it as an alarm clock. And so if Amazon really wants to figure out how to have an ongoing relationship with you when it doesn't dominate your phone, because they tried a phone and it didn't work, really the only option they have is to make it so that you don't look at your phone because you're looking at something else. And I actually think that little alarm clock object, which, by the way, I can't ever remember what it's called as well, I think that's a really smart move for someone who is looking at their second, their third, their fourth Echo device. It's not a first Echo device. It's not the one that's going to impress you right out of the gate.
Well, at AWS, apparently they announced Alexa for Business, the idea that people in a business setting like your conference room there, you're going to say, Alexa, phone in George in St. Louis, and it's all going to happen seamlessly. What's your sense of the prospect for success there, particularly given what we've just talked about and how they're doing in the home?
So then the two things they have going for them, number one is the form factor. if you've ever been involved in an IT decision-making process, like where they have to replace the phones in an office, it's an incredibly expensive and time-consuming. It has to be processed. It has to be integrated in the existing systems, all that stuff. Well, if you can just take a small Echo Dot and just plug it in somewhere, and it automatically configures on your network, and you don't have to use, traditional phone line or even Ethernet lines. That's really a tremendous benefit. And so I expect that will tantalize some executives as they're making these decisions. The second thing is just really, it's going to be about the software experience. If Amazon delivers a software experience that does exactly what you say, where I can walk into a conference room and imagine, here in my office, we have, maybe 16 conference rooms per floor. If I could walk into any one of them and say, call George, and have it, imagine it goes through this process. It recognizes my voice, so it has to take a voice print of everyone in the office. It knows from my calendar lookup who I'm trying to call that time of day if I have a scheduled meeting on my calendar. And of course it knows that person because when I entered the meeting, either they're an employee and so their contact information is already available, or I've put that calling information into the meeting invite, the way people do in the world of business. So really, this is not hard to do. You could see exactly what steps would need to happen to make this happen, yet no one has done this. No one. Cisco's never going to do it because it would cannibalize their existing audio and video conferencing business. No other major vendor of these devices is going to do this. They're going to hope that no one figures out how to do this. So Amazon stepping up and saying, we're going to take a stab at that is a really courageous thing. Now, the one thing that Amazon doesn't do well is they can't see calendars that are behind a firewall. So I've never been able to synchronize my Outlook calendar for work with my Echo devices at home. When I was on Gmail, it worked just fine. I could say, Alexa, what's on my calendar today? And she would read to me the items on my calendar, which was great. And that was supposed to lead naturally to being able to make phone calls based on those items in my calendar. But once you get into Outlook and actually more and more corporate security because of all the breaches and hackings that are happening recently, they're starting to lock those things down so that third-party software can't access your calendar. So that's going to be a challenge for Amazon. How more and more companies are comfortable using AWS for their processes, but to then bring Amazon with these cute little plastic pucks into your conference room and have them voice print identify every employee in the company, that's going to cause some consternation with some people. So I think feasibly, strategically, Amazon could do this. Whether or not they have the chops to sell into businesses the way a Microsoft does, I don't think they have them.
Well, and you mentioned Microsoft. Since Outlook is a Microsoft program, would they kind of have the inside lane on getting Cortana to be the dominant voice controller for the workplace?
Well, you would think so, but I don't see any movements on their part to invest in this direction. I mean, interestingly, they've partnered with Amazon to make Cortana available through Alexa, and Alexa available through Cortana. So, maybe there's an interesting deal there where Microsoft says, hey, we'd like to sell a whole bunch of Microsoft Dot-looking devices that are designed specifically for the enterprise, integrated with Outlook, have all the same security as Outlook. I mean, that seems like a really good solution. And if I were Amazon, I would partner with Microsoft to make that happen because that's a more likely outcome. Yeah.
Did you follow AWS enough to see anything else that was groundbreaking that came out of that recent conference in Las Vegas?
The reInvent conference, I have to admit, isn't one I follow as closely because it is so focused on the behind the scenes, the data, the artificial intelligence. I'm usually trying to read the conference to see where the momentum is, and it's clearly the momentum is on artificial intelligence in 2018. This is going to be for everyone, not just at Amazon. This is going to be the place where we start to see the next generation of software experiences, whether it's on an Alexa-like device or anywhere else. We're just going to see intelligence added to so many different domains, and Amazon really wants to be the software platform for that.
Well, you've written, you were co-author of a report that came out recently that seemed to be pointing that direction about how chief marketing officers are going to have to focus on experience and emotion. Are those sort of the drivers you see of who's going to win and who's going to lose in this Wild West battle for AI dominance?
Well, yes and no. There's a little more to it if you're also talking to the CIO. That particular report, and much of the work I do is written to the CMO. And so we're talking about, okay, within your purview, what do you have responsibility for? And it's more and more like 50% of CMOs now at major companies are responsible for customer experience. That keeps growing as more and more companies develop a customer experience program, and then they don't really know where to house it. Is that in the operations side? Is it on IT side? No, it really belongs under the marketing department if the marketing department is sophisticated. And then the second thing that we're telling people is, just having a customer experience model that recognizes the points of frustration in your experience and the points of peak emotion in your experience and tries to reduce frustration and increase the peaks of emotion, that's nice, but it's not going to be enough in the future. Simply making people generically happy and reducing their generic frustration isn't enough. We actually, and we've done some really compelling research on this, have identified that specific emotions will yield more connection to the customer. That is, if you invite the customer not just to feel generically happy, but specific types of happiness, more connected, more respected, but depending on the brand and depending on the category. It's different in every category and different for opportunity for every brand. But the point is you have to get specific as to which emotions your email marketing is trying to trigger. You can't just trigger urgency all the time. It's like, oh, this expires tonight. And that's urgency, and that's an emotion that does motivate people, but it turns out that it's not as effective when we look at things like email click-through rates as other emotions, depending on your specific customer, depending on your specific product and your specific brand. And so what we're doing is trying to help CMOs understand, well, how do you get specific with people's emotions? Well, you actually have to use artificial intelligence. There's some really great vendors out there who are calculating through all of the for example, the email marketing. I brought that one up because I was just recently participating in a webinar on this topic. There's a vendor called Persado, and what they've done is they'll go through an entire history of a company's outbound email marketing, and they will extract the emotions that are present in their offers, in their emails, and they'll say, look, these three emotions are the ones you use the most, but this one doesn't actually perform well, and this one actually only performs slightly better than average, whereas these other emotions, when you use them, tend to overperform. So next time you go into their dashboard and you type an email message that you want to send to your customers, it will actually automatically rewrite that for you and say, these are the emotional contexts that you need to draw into the invitation. You need to change where the emotion happens in the email, all based on your actual past and awareness of your actual customers. So that's where we start to get the ability to serve someone's individual emotional needs through artificial intelligence. There's a whole artificial intelligence back end behind that makes that happen. And this is happening in segmentation. It's happening in branding efforts. We're seeing artificial intelligence be applied in all of these marketing specific ways. Now, if you say it like that, it makes it sound like, oh, great, you just have to sign up for these really amazing vendors who are providing all these services. But on the IT side, there's a lot more that has to happen for artificial intelligence. There are some very specific steps of gathering the data that you have, figuring out how to put it into the system to train the system. What is it that you're asking the system to train? I'm not an expert in these things, but my colleagues who are wrote recently that 55% of companies who've invested in AI have yet to see any return of any measurable return in their business, and it's because they're feeling their way forward. They're not exactly sure what they're using these tools for. So there's a lot to do there, and I know this takes us considerably out of the way of our conversation about Amazon, but Amazon wants to be the engine behind that with its AWS platform. And given the $4-point-something billion that Amazon made from the AWS platform just in Q3 of this year, one quarter.
Amazing.
That means they're at a run right now by in 2018 they'll easily make more than $20 billion off of the off of the AWS business, and that at that point it's obviously the fastest growing part of Amazon's, but it's what funds everything else. So when you see all these Echo devices coming off of Amazon, it's because they have some cash to spend thanks to AWS, and they want to maintain that dominance in that business. So that's where they're going to invest.
Well, I think there was some information about who should read that report that you were talking about, and it's saying that customer obsession is the foundation for organizational success in 2018. I can see customer obsession that's aware of the emotional content of the messaging. That's clearly a pretty intriguing area. When you say customer obsession, of course, that sounds like Amazon speak. It
comes straight.
If everybody reads and acts on Forrester's good advice in this area, how does Amazon stay still a step ahead and lead to something that looks like customer obsession that is still new and still original and kind of leading?
Well, let's recognize that Amazon has been focused on customer obsession for 20 years. So they've gotten pretty good at it. Bezos has made a big deal out of talking about it's always day one, where you have to prove yourself on day one. And I guess last year one of his employees in a company meeting asked him, well, when is it day two, Jeff? What does day two look like? And he said he thought about it, and he said it's never day two. It's always going to be day one, because once we decide that it's day two, we've given up, which is a really interesting attitude. So they have a good history in this vein. It's going to be hard to catch that level of passion and commitment to it. But that said, if other companies do figure out how to be as customer obsessed as Amazon, and they try to apply it to their specific area of expertise, which is the thing. Amazon can't be expert in everything. They know that. They're very selective in what areas they try to approach. And even when they do things like move towards the pharmacy business, and so CVS runs out and buys Aetna because they're trying to create the future of consumer healthcare. There is knowledge about consumer healthcare outside of Amazon that Amazon wishes desperately they had. And if someone who had that knowledge said, well, I'm just going to become customer obsessed and we're going to transform the healthcare business from inside the healthcare business, they really could. There's nothing stopping them from doing it other than their own hesitation. Like I said, Cisco's never going to revamp their corporate communications devices because they'd have too much to lose. And that's usually what's true of a company like CVS or Aetna or any of these other firms, is that they don't want to disrupt their current business. It's classic disruption research philosophy here. And so they can say all day long, well, we care about the customer too, just like Amazon. But if they're not willing to actually rethink their business on behalf of the customer, I explained this to the CEO of a large insurance company in Singapore a couple of weeks back. I was there for some meetings and a workshop with them, and I explained to them, I said the challenge of suddenly becoming customer obsessed is that most companies take the business they already do, the steps and processes and tools that they already have, and they then add the customer to them. And that makes sense if it's 1995. But today you can't. You actually have to start with the customer and say, how would we design a business around this customer's needs? And then you have to swallow that bitter pill and actually go through that design process. So it's not easy. And most companies don't want to do that. So I think Amazon feels pretty confident that they could attack any business they want, and the incumbents will spend 4 or 5 years resisting before they realize that they have no choice. Whereas a little proactive customer obsession on the part of any of those companies could probably make it so that Amazon decides to go elsewhere.
What do you expect from the Whole Foods acquisition?
Number one goal there with Whole Foods for Amazon is to just absolutely lock down its relationship with the most attractive zip codes in America. And they are getting pushback on that, and they will get critiqued for that because, and I think you and I have talked before about how they have to then try to serve more rural communities and more actually urban but less affluent areas to compensate. But in the end, Amazon's strength is going to be really making sure it has tight relationships with those people in those kinds of communities that Whole Foods, demographically was already attracted to. And I think that's a winner. Now, what it does to disrupt the rest of the grocery business, we'll have to see, because it is eventually going to drive down the margins on Whole Foods. And so will Whole Foods become yet another thing that Amazon subsidizes as a way to make its relationship solid? If you're in a typical week, and here's a really interesting stat that I'm about to publish. The average Prime customer buys something from Amazon every 6 days.
Wow. Well,
if you can now add Whole Foods, well, that's going to be every 4 days, every 3 days for some of these customers. And that's a very powerful relationship. And that would probably be worth subsidizing. Even if you only make a 1 or 2% profit off of that, it's probably worth it, as long as you have AWS cranking away in the back room to pay for it all.
Yeah, similar to some of the content they've been generating for video that pulls the Prime customer toward them and probably isn't making much money yet.
Yeah, and I don't imagine. I mean, we just saw what they announced they're going to spend on the Lord of the Rings universe, that they have some plans to create some additional content in that universe, hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not clear they're trying to make a profit there. They're trying to sustain the relationship. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, let's finish up. You're a pretty good prognosticator when it comes to Amazon. I'm wondering where you think HQ2 is going to be located.
Oh, I have really sweat over that. I mean, there's some obvious. If you just look at tier 2 communities in the country that are really eager to please, they have a lot of land. You can look at places like Nashville. You can look at places like Colorado. I haven't looked at all of the 200 and I can't remember how many, 60 or 80 different pitches that they got from people to see which one I would expect the most. I do just expect it to be a tier 2 kind of metropolitan area, something that's up and coming, and it could even reach down. I hate to call it tier 3, but sort of it could even be for really economic reasons on the one hand, because land would be cheap and the population wouldn't need to be paid a whole bunch. But I also think it would mean a lot socially if they were to go somewhere like
Pittsburgh,
where I've been recently. Well, yeah, Pittsburgh, or go to. I was just recently in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh.
Some really, really great things happening in some of these cities. Some really smart people who are working there. The Pittsburgh one is obvious because of the Carnegie Mellon connection, and there are communities like that as well. So it feels like they really do have every possible good option available to them. And I think if they did this in such a way that it made America feel like Amazon was trying to build America rather than extract profits from it, which is the way some people feel, not everyone, but some people, and in particular the mainstream media, love to present it that way, as we've seen in the New York Times over the years. Even just saw in the Wall Street Journal that they're writing about Amazon allowing people to do such aggressive comparison shopping is actually suppressing inflation and making it hard for economists to measure inflation. And they talk about that as if that's a big conundrum and a big deal, and which it is, of course, because the Fed has to set monetary policy according to what it perceives inflation to be. But when you read the details of the story, there are these people who are using Amazon to save $10-20 every time they go to the store. That's goodness for the kind of people that typically get written about as shopping at Walmart or Dollar General. So I think Amazon needs to try to work a little bit on that PR side of their efforts, and HQ2 might help with that.
If you were advising the mayor of Boston and the team that's trying to lure Amazon here, what would you emphasize about Boston as a location?
I don't know that I could in good conscience.
Closeness to the Forrester headquarters.
There you go. No, I don't think the infrastructure in Boston makes sense for. And this is where it's going to come down to things that outsiders will have to criticize the decision that Amazon makes, no matter what, because obviously several hundred communities aren't going to be accepted, and they'll criticize it. But when it comes down to things like the transportation infrastructure in Boston is just really terrible, and so trying to create a community, a workforce that can easily commute in to what is going to be a large base of employees. It's just not something that Boston has to offer. And that's another reason why I look at places like in Omaha, Nebraska, and I think these are communities that they would be willing to redesign some of the way their communities operate in order to accommodate the growth. So, good luck, Boston, but I doubt it.
Yeah. What's the most important book you've read so far this year that's helped guide your thinking and your approach to the work you do?
Yeah, well, as you know, and you've asked me this question in the past, I have a very varied approach to reading. I mean, I just finished the third book in Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings series, and it's spectacular, 1,200 pages long. But that's not the most important book. The thing I think I will say is the most important is Robert Sapolsky's Behave. Now, I read a lot of these kinds of books. This is sort of popularization of either social science or neuroscience. And I read just so many of these. I have a shelf full of them, actually, because the ones I really, really like, I go and buy the physical copy and I put on my shelf so that I can easily access it. This is one of those. Sapolsky his background's pretty varied. He has a lot of accomplishments in the area of neuroscience, but he's also a paleontologist. And so what he has done in this book, and he's called it Behave because he's looking at what are the things that contribute to the way we behave, with a special emphasis on aggression. So because, it's the easiest place where most people have studied what makes people do hurtful or harmful things to other people. And he just does this amazing job of going across all the social and physiological sciences and summarizing all the things that contribute to someone's decision to either hit someone or be aggressive with them. All the obvious things that you've read about testosterone or about cortisol or about the psychology of violence or being raised with or without a male figure, all of it. He compiles it all into a single comprehensive view, and he does it with such intellectual both rigor and openness, because he says this study says this, but that other study says the opposite, and let's wrestle with what that might mean. So for someone like me, it's absolutely fascinating, and it really, believe it or not, helps me think through other behaviors that we're trying to track and forecast here at Forrester and in my research, which is, why would someone choose a brand based on the brand's support or lack of support for a particular political point of view? When Patagonia comes out and says, Donald Trump stole your public land, America, they're coming out on a particular point of view. Well, that's a particular type of aggression that Patagonia is manifesting. And will that stimulate an aggressive response in its customers that will ultimately benefit Patagonia? I mean, that's a fair social scientist question. And it is rooted in the biology of why people in particular who are outdoors climbing and hiking and running, that Patagonia's customer, why their aggression profile would or would not cause them to say, yeah, you go, Patagonia, tell President Trump what he's done wrong, or not. I'm trying to make a connection here between the work I do on a day-to-day basis and Sapolsky's book, but even if you don't have a connection between your own work and his book, I recommend it. I think it's just an intellectual tour de force that is just worth anyone's time.
I have been speaking with James McQuivey, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Thanks very much, James.
Thank you, Len.
In content, I will have a link to a very well-done graphic based on Amazon Charts data for 2017. You will find the most purchased and most read books nationwide in the U.S., along with a pull-down menu showing fun facts for each state. For example, it turns out that Wyoming likes its whodunits. By population, readers in Wyoming bought more mystery and thriller books than any other state. A lot of fun things like that, and some nice ways to present data that only Amazon knows and is making available through Amazon Charts in a particularly appealing way toward the end of the year. Had a comment from Michael John, who wrote, Len, I thought I'd respond to the question about the Oasis and wake-up time. I have a new Oasis with LTE. I just timed how long it took to become readable from opening the cover, 6.32 seconds. It does seem longer than the Paperwhite, but I don't have one anymore to compare. I've noticed that this new Oasis seems to last while in sleep mode quite a bit longer than the original Oasis. I was a little surprised at how quickly my original Oasis ran down when I wasn't reading it. Could this mean that the new Oasis goes into deeper sleep mode that takes longer to wake up? In other words, it doesn't wake up to check for updates or syncing as much. Just a supposition. Regardless, waiting a few seconds to start reading really isn't an issue for me. Also, I would have bet money that Richard de Trafford was Australian. Once you pointed out he was from the U.S., he quit sounding Australian. What an interesting way that our mind works. Regards, Michael. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Bye.